The last few moments of A Quiet Place are, to me, indicative of one of the major flaws in Hollywood cinema. Before I qualify that admittedly overblown statement, I just want to say that, overall, I thought the film was pretty good. I didn't love it. The monsters were more annoying than real organic threats, and there were a few contrivances that made me roll my eyes, but the central premise alone is narrative gold. A breed of super monster that relies exclusively on its incredible hearing leads a family to construct new, desperate ways to survive. That need for silence creates an atmosphere that is stifling and intriguing and, at its best, truly cinematic. Premise also forces the film to clearly delineate the rules of the world, heightening believability and audience participation as we wonder how we would fare in this fallen world. These are the film's strongest points, and there's nothing I could say or that I'd want to say to take away from them. But they are also the very reason I find the ending so hard to swallow. So what's the problem? Monster bad, humans want to survive, humans kill monster. Seems logical. But what had we just seen in the last hour and a half of the movie? Had we seen a ferocious battle for supremacy between humans and a swarm of invaders? Was this about resistance and resilience under fire? Or was this a film about human adaptability, about tools and technology, and finding the inner strength to survive? Look, I understand why this moment exists. After a film drowning in silence and suspense, it's meant to offer the audience a release. You can see how the creative team saw it as a kind of emotional climax to the film. Not just in the story, but for the people viewing it. A loud exhale communicating to everyone watching the film that they can breathe again. There's a word for this.
Catharsis.
The process of releasing and thereby providing relief from strong or repressed emotions. The problem is, catharsis just doesn't work like that. Catharsis is a big word for anyone interested in narrative. Despite having a range of definitions and applications, it's pretty widely accepted as the
raison d'etre
for narrative drama. Essentially, its starting point for our purposes is with the Greek philosopher Aristotle. In his Poetics, he essentially outlines what makes good drama and identified its purpose as an effect on the viewer that he called catharsis. So, what is catharsis? Well, it's complicated. Big brain Aristotle never really pinned down the term, and there's been a lot of arguments since. However, what most people can agree on is that catharsis is the essential change we undergo interacting with the story and the feeling of release we have by the end. This release doesn't have to be relief. Maybe we learn something, maybe we deal with our own suppressed feelings. The point is that by identifying with characters in a story, we get to join them vicariously and undergo some sort of transformation. So what's wrong with the way A Quiet Place deals with its catharsis? Well, the cathartic effect has to come from the substance that elicited it. A cathartic effect isn't any ending, it's the one that comes from the material that precedes it. If you're constipated, sneezing doesn't really give you anything, and if you're
aroused,
then you may be able to displace some of that tension into physical exercise, but eventually the only thing that's going to help is a good fat. My point is that some things will help, but it will never be the release you need. This is made apparent in A Quiet Place, because it has the ending that suits it. The moment here where Regan Abbott figures out how to kill the monster and does it should have been the real ending. It meets all the criteria of the story before it, and had been not so subtly seeded several times, so we knew it was coming. It works perfectly, and so everything that happens afterwards is, at best, superfluous, but at worst playing into a really negative stereotype about catharsis. There is an idea in heavy circulation that the best way for a cathartic release is through some act of aggression, real or imagined. Though this concept was taken seriously for a while in the late 19th and the 20th century, it has since been frequently debunked. The only reason this idea continues to persist is its convenience. Not only does it sound like it makes sense, but it can be used in tandem with the idea that certain media promote certain types of behavior. Violent media makes people behave violently, and if you squint, theories on catharsis, particularly this dope's, seem to promote this fact. Even though they come from very different places, it's the same reasoning that leads to this clown holding a conference on video game violence that gets this moment into a movie. Now, of course, media has an effect on people. That's why it exists. But this hydraulic model of emotions that says any outlet for suspense or frustration will do is just untrue. The moment of catharsis has to come from the substance that elicited its need. This means that catharsis can be bombastic, but only on occasions when it makes sense. It's clear and consistent why a film like Predator ends the way it does. And if you ever deep dive into the misogynistic quagmire of Fatal Attraction, the 1-2 punch of this and this are pretty much the only conclusions that would have worked. There's also the case of Ripley's revenge at the end of Aliens, when she turns from hunted to hunter, a moment that A Quiet Place may very well have been attempting to reference. The difference is that where Aliens seeded this moment in the structure of the story and the character of Ripley, A Quiet Place spent its time leading to this conclusion, leaving this to feel totally tacked on. As a final point, I'd like to look at an example that does the exact opposite of A Quiet Place. In The Third Man, Holly Martins comes to Ally-occupied Vienna in search of his childhood friend Harry Lime. In the course of the narrative, Martins discovers that Lime is a criminal profiteering from the direct suffering of others. At the end of the story, Martins is left with no choice but to kill a wounded Lime. But the film doesn't end there, even though it may have been apt to. Instead, we see Cotton at Lime's funeral, reflecting an earlier scene in the film. Not much happens here, except Cotton is snubbed by Lime's girlfriend. So why does this moment exist? It's there because the film wasn't about a gunfight. It was about the alienation of two friends and a world pushed to breaking and open to exploitation by those who would do it. The ending is the confirmation that we are all, at the end of the day, alone and unsure. Going back, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that a big finish is the only way to go, and to imagine the relief and joy that audiences would feel when that shotgun blast rang out. You can see the idea that the noise worked thematically into the piece, dispelling the forced silence due to the hostile invaders. But when that sound reverberates backwards, contradicting and undoing everything that came before it, was it worth it?